Have you ever noticed that schools are looking more and more like prisons, with increased security cameras, metal detectors, and police presence? Well, these increased security measures reflect the future path of students if they are pushed into the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline is our nationwide system of educational policies and practices that drive students from the classroom to the juvenile and criminal justice system. Students are taken out of schools due to zero-tolerance disciplinary policies that were created in the 1980s. Zero-tolerance policies are in place to remove disruptive behaviors from the learning environment. Unfortunately, Cellular and Markowski 2015 shared that zero-tolerance policies automatically impose punishments on students and mandate suspension or expulsion from school for certain offenses, often without consideration of the circumstances. At their inception, these policies pertained to only the most serious offenses, such as bringing a weapon to school, but over time, the policies have expanded to include lesser infractions such as alcohol or tobacco use, fighting, or swearing. The original development of zero-tolerance policies was intended as a solution to major violations involving weapons and drugs in school. However, over the years, students can now be pushed out of school for minor infractions. In fact, SCIBA 2004 found that 15 years after the rise of zero tolerance and almost 10 years since it became a national policy for weapons, there is still no credible evidence that zero-tolerance suspensions and expulsions are an effective method for changing student behavior. If there were no zero-tolerance policies in place, students would stay in school and face alternative disciplinary actions. In addition, the incidents should be evaluated and administrators should consider the circumstances before removing students from school. Students are children. They should not be kicked out of school for making minor mistakes. Students should be taught the appropriate behaviors to eliminate the possibility of problem behaviors occurring again. For instance, using positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS, to manage student behaviors and reward students when displaying appropriate behaviors will help create the positive learning environment that zero-tolerance policies had hoped to achieve. This effective evidence-based framework would help diminish the school-to-prison pipeline, keep students in schools and out of the criminal justice system. However, not all students are being affected by the zero-tolerance policies and school-to-prison pipeline the same. There are great inequities among those involved in the school-to-prison pipeline. According to research, African American students, for instance, are 3.5 times more likely than their white classmates to be suspended or expelled. Furthermore, it has been found that students with disabilities are twice as likely to be suspended than non-disabled students. When students are not in school, they may feel isolated and have less connectedness with the school. In fact, when students are suspended or expelled, there is an increased likelihood of dropping out linked with criminal activity. According to researchers, suspended students were 30% more likely to have been arrested once, 51% more likely to have been arrested 2 or more times, 49% more likely to be on probation, and 23% more likely to be in prison than non-suspended students. When students are suspended, this is under the control of administrators and school officials. However, when school resource officers and police are present in schools, they may be obligated to follow a separate incident procedure. For instance, we find that school resource officer and police presence corresponds with increased likelihood that the school will report student incidents to law enforcement agencies. Occasionally, incidents may bypass teachers and administrators and go directly to law enforcement agencies. Additionally, it has been found that 70% of police referrals are made up of Black and Latino students. Overall, the presence of police officers in school can affect the number of students funneled into the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline trap can be a life-altering experience for students. The school-to-prison pipeline has interested me since 5 years ago in an undergraduate course. I saw a documentary on the effects of this critical issue. When learning about the school-to-prison pipeline, I was exposed to a whole new perspective on education because I never experienced or knew that this was happening. Once I learned more about the school-to-prison pipeline, I can't just ignore that this is happening. I must do something about it, especially as an educator who could contribute to the school-to-prison pipeline. In addition, after student teaching in a second grade class in an urban city school district with predominantly children of color, I saw how many students were being sent to the principal's office daily. I remember one day specifically that half of my class was in the principal's office for various reasons. It was heartbreaking because the students who were missing learning instruction are the students who needed it most. It worries me that being sent to the principal's office is the beginning stage of the school-to-prison pipeline. To make a change, it starts with me. It starts with me self-reflecting on my own experiences and teaching practices. It also requires educators to ensure equity for all students. We must fight against our biases to ensure students are not being targeted or treated unfairly. Educators should provide all students with what they need to succeed academically. As an educator entering the field of teaching, this critical issue teaches me to be mindful of my actions. I will use classroom management strategies, work with families and my students, and research to support my teaching practices. I will implement as much as I can before sending students to administrators. Learning useful PBIS management practices will reinforce appropriate behaviors, therefore students feel rewarded when doing the right thing. This is what it is going to take to make a positive learning environment, not kicking out students for making mistakes. And teaching them right from wrong will not only help create a safe space, but it will also prevent them from going down a path that they can no longer escape. If I do my part, I hope it will prevent students from being sucked into the school-to-prison pipeline. As an educator, I want the best for each of my students. I want to see them succeed in and out of school, because I know that the school-to-prison pipeline changes the lives of students forever. Which path will you lead your students down? To prison or to success?